What happens when one of country music's most respected artists goes toe-to-toe with a talk show host who refuses to pull his punches? Tonight, we're breaking down the explosive on-air clash that ended with Chris Stapleton walking off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, millions stunned, and the internet buzzing for weeks. This wasn't a routine interview gone sideways. It was a slow-burn confrontation, a masterclass in rising tension that built, moment by moment, toward a breaking point no one saw coming. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think triggered this meltdown. The strain in Studio 6A was already simmering when Chris Stapleton settled into the guest chair. What should have been harmless pre-show banter had shifted into something colder during the commercial break. And now, with cameras rolling live across America, neither man seemed willing to blink first. "So, Chris, welcome back," Jimmy said, the trademark grin feeling a touch strained as he shuffled his cards. "Your new album is getting incredible reviews, but there's been some interesting commentary about your recent statements on the music industry." Chris didn't look away. "Jimmy, I've always been honest about how the business has changed. Music used to be about the story you're trying to tell." Jimmy nodded too, quickly. Right. But when you say the industry has lost its way, some people hear that as you taking shots at other artists who do things differently." The shift was immediate. Applause died. The room thickened with anticipation. Chris leaned forward, steady but sharper now. "There's a difference between taking shots and stating your beliefs. I've never called anyone out by name. I talk about authenticity, about what makes a great song great." "But come on," Jimmy pushed, the smile fading. "When you talk about authenticity in country music, everyone knows who you mean. The pop country artists dominating the charts. Isn't that like throwing stones from a glass house?" The question hit the room like a gunshot. Chris's jaw tightened. "A glass house," he echoed, voice dropping into that low, dangerous tone fans know well. "Jimmy, I've been writing and performing for over 20 years. Dive bars, Aaroness, you name it. I've never compromised what I believe makes music worth listening to." Jimmy sensed the hit and leaned in harder. "I am not questioning your resume, but let's be honest. You've built your brand on being the authentic guy in a sea of manufactured pop country. That's a pretty convenient stance once you're already successful." Now the studio was dead still, crew included. This wasn't late-night banter anymore. Chris sat back, his voice turning razor-sharp. "Convenient? There's nothing convenient about turning down opportunities because they don't align with your principles. Nothing easy about saying no when people want you to change who you are. But that's exactly what I mean." Jimmy cut in, gaining momentum. "You act like you're the guardian of some sacred tradition. Music evolves. Maybe the artists you seem to have a problem with are just adapting to what audiences want." For the first time, Chris's composure cracked. His eyes narrowed, his posture stiffened. "What audiences want?" he repeated. "Or, what record labels want to sell them?" Jimmy's smile was gone now. "So you're saying the millions streaming these songs are being manipulated?" "I'm saying when you focus group a song to death, when it's written by committee, when it's engineered for radio, instead of truth, something gets lost." Chris shot back. "And people can feel that, even if they can't explain it." The audience shifted uncomfortably. This was supposed to be fun, a country star cameo on a comedy show. Instead, they were watching a philosophical fight. Jimmy leaned back, expression hardening. "All right, if authenticity is so important, then explain this. Your biggest hits, songs that made you a household name, were written years before you recorded them. Isn't it a little calculated to hold on to songs until the perfect moment?" Chris's hands, steady until now, curled into fists. The question crossed a line, and everyone in the room felt it. Chris's entire demeanor shifted, controlled, quiet, but charged with something unmistakably dangerous. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried far more menace than if he had shouted. "Calculated," he said. "Jimmy, those songs came from places of real pen experiences that shaped who I am. I didn't hold on to them because I was plotting some career move. I held on to them because they mattered too much to dump onto the wrong project." "But you did wait," Jimmy pressed, oblivious or unmoved by the warning signs that Chris had reached his threshold. "You waited until you had your solo deal, until the timing was perfect for your career. That sounds pretty strategic." The silence that followed was suffocating. Chris stared at him with a level of intensity that made people in the front row shrink back in their seats. When he finally spoke, each word landed with deliberate force. "You want to talk strategy, Jimmy?" he said. "Fine, let's talk strategy. Let's talk about how you book guests specifically to create moments like this, clips that go viral. Manufactured controversy to keep your show relevant." A flush crept into Jimmy's face, but he forced himself to stay composed. "That's a serious accusation. Are you saying I brought you here to ambush you?" "I'm saying you spent the last 10 minutes trying to get me to take a swipe at other artists," Chris shot back. "And when I didn't play along, you came at my integrity instead. You want authenticity. Here it is. This is what it looks like when someone stops playing your game." Behind the cameras, the production team descended into chaos. Whispered instructions. Frantic hand signals, everyone trying to salvage a situation that was slipping beyond their control. The show was live. There was no editing, no safety net. Jimmy clearly sensed he'd gone too far. But instead of easing off, he doubled down yet again. Chris, you're taking this way too personally. This is just a conversation. This is what talk shows are. We ask tough questions. We talk about the truth. Chris let out a laugh, but there was nothing remotely humorous in it. The truth, he said. The truth is, you invited me here to promote my music. And instead, you tried to paint me as some elitist who looks down on other artists. The truth is, you care more about stirring up drama than talking about music. I think you're being dramatic, Jimmy replied, a condescending lilt creeping into his tone, pouring gasoline on open flames. This is television. This is entertainment. People don't tune in for softball questions about your latest single. Chris stood, slowly, deliberately. His chair scraped across the floor with a sound that echoed through the stunned studio. The air shifted. The power in the room shifted. Everyone felt it. Entertainment. Chris repeated, now towering over Jimmy's desk. So my music, my career, my principles there, just content to you. Just something to chew up and spit out for ratings. For the first time all night, Jimmy's confidence faltered. Chris, come on, sit down. Let's talk about this like adults. We are talking like adults, Chris said, voice steady but heavy with disappointment. Adults don't ambush their guests. Adults don't manipulate people into saying things they'll regret. Adults show respect to the people they invite into their space. Camera operators looked to their directors, unsure if they were supposed to keep rolling or cut away. Audience members pulled out their phones, sensing they were watching something historic kind of moment that would dominate headlines and social feeds for years. Jimmy finally stood as well, perhaps realizing how drastically the dynamic had tilted. Okay, he said, let's take a step back. We're both heated. Maybe we should just reset. Chris's laugh was cold. Reset? Jimmy, you don't get to reset when things stop going your way. You don't get to rewind and pretend the last 15 minutes didn't happen. This isn't a rehearsal. This isn't a bit. This is real. Desperation seeped into Jimmy's voice. Chris Lakai, get it? You're upset. But we're live right now. Millions of people are watching. Maybe we should just move on, Jimmy said, his voice thin with strain. Talk about your tour, your new album. Chris stared at him like he'd just heard the most absurd thing in the world. Now you want to talk about my music? He asked, disbelief dripping from every word. After spending this entire interview trying to tear down everything I stand for, now you want to pivot to the safe questions. Now you want to play it straight. Jimmy's hands trembled as he tried to regain control. I wasn't tearing anything down, Chris. I was asking legitimate questions about your public statements. That's what interviewers do. That's what journalists. Chris cut in, laughing sharply. Jimmy, you're a comedian who hosts a talk show. You're not Bob Woodward. You're not breaking Watergate. You invited me here to promote my album, and instead, you sprung an ambush because you thought it'd make good TV. Behind the cameras, panic rippled through the crew. The director's frantic gestures offered no solution. There was no natural moment to cut away. Nothing to soften the collision unfolding live. I think you're completely misunderstanding what happened here, Jimmy insisted, voice rising as he grasped for authority. I asked you about things you said publicly, statements reported everywhere. If you didn't want to talk about them, maybe you shouldn't have made them in the first place. That did it. Whatever thin thread of composure Chris had left snapped clean through. You want to know what I think? Jimmy, his voice cut through the studio like a blade. I think you're what's wrong with this industry. You don't care about music or art or the people who bleed for it. You care about viral clips, about trending moments, about turning real artists into content for your nightly highlight reel. That's not fair, and you know it, Jimmy fired back, his own facade cracking. I've had hundreds of musicians on this show. I've supported them, promoted their albums, celebrated their careers. Asking a tough question doesn't mean I don't respect what you do. Respect, Chris repeated, incredulous. This is what you call respect. You bring me on, pretending we're going to talk about music, then spend the whole time trying to bait me into throwing other artists under the bus so you can have your little gotcha moment. That's not respect. That's exploitation. The audience was silent, utterly still. The tension between the two men felt almost physical, like the air itself had thickened around them. Jimmy's face had gone fully red now. His practice.com was gone. You know what, Chris? Maybe the problem isn't everyone else. Maybe the problem is you. Maybe you're so wrapped up in your self-righteous bubble that the second someone challenges your precious principles, you melt down. Maybe you're defensive because deep down, you know I'm right. His words hung there, daring Chris to explode. For a moment, it looked like he might. But instead, Chris inhaled slowly, deeply. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. You want the truth, Jimmy? He said. I came here tonight thinking we could have a real conversation about music, about songwriting, about the things that actually matter. Instead, I found out you're just another person who cares more about conflict than creativity. Chris began unclipping his microphone, every motion smooth and final. The truth is, people like you have turned this industry into a circus. Controversy sells. Outrage sells. Everything's about attention. Not meaning, not honesty, not art. Jimmy's eyes widened with dawning panic as the mic came free. Chris, don't do this. We can fix this. We can finish the interview. Your fans are watching. Your label is watching. Think about what this looks like. For the first time since the confrontation started, Chris looked straight into the camera. His eyes burned with anger, but also something deeper: betrayal. My fans know who I am, he said. They know I don't back down from speaking the truth, even when it costs me. He handed the microphone to a stunned production assistant. Jimmy, I hope you get the viral moment you wanted. I hope it was worth it. Jimmy stood frozen behind his desk as Chris turned and walked toward the exit. The weight of what was happening finally hit him, and desperation cracked through his voice as he called across the studio. Chris, wait. Please don't walk out like this. We're still live. But Chris never looked back. Asterisk, we've got 8 more minutes left in the show, Jimmy said, panic creeping into his voice. Your publicist is going to kill both of us if you walk off right now. Chris paused at the edge of the interview area, one hand resting on the back of a guest chair. For a moment, it looked like he might turn around, like he might give Jimmy one last chance to pull the moment back from disaster. But when he finally spoke, there was no hesitation left in him. My publicist didn't ask me to compromise my principles, Jimmy, he said. She asked me to come on your show and talk about my music. I tried. You turned it into something else. Across the studio, the band exchanged uneasy glances. No one had a blueprint for this, no cue cards. No emergency protocol for a guest walking out in the middle of a live broadcast. Look, Jimmy said, his voice edging into desperation. Maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe we started off on the wrong foot. But we can fix this. Just come back. Sit down. We start fresh. Chris turned back one last time. The disappointment on his face hit harder than any outburst ever could. Jimmy, this isn't something you patch up with a joke, he said quietly. This isn't a bit gone wrong. Tonight you showed me exactly who you are and what you think of artists like me. You don't get to take that back. The cameras kept rolling. The director hovered, torn between going to commercial or letting the unthinkable play out on air. The moment was bigger than any decision he could make. I think you're making a huge mistake, Jimmy said, the pleading in his tone sharpening into frustration. You're going to look like the bad guy here. People will say you couldn't handle a few tough questions that you ran when things got uncomfortable. Chris actually smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile you give when someone proves a point you already knew was true. There it is, he said. There's the real Jimmy Kimmel, not the concerned host, not the guy who just wants to talk about music, the guy who thinks threatening someone's reputation is how you keep them in line. Phones were out everywhere now. The audience understood. Instinctively, they were witnessing something that would be replayed, dissected, and argued about for years. That's not what I meant, Jimmy insisted, flustered. I just meant from a public relations standpoint, Chris cut in. I'd rather be someone who walks away from disrespect than someone who sits there and swallows it to avoid making waves. He turned toward the exit again, walking with the confidence of someone who finally chose self-respect over spectacle. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy turned to the camera, his face stunned. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, no. Chris's voice rang out from near the studio doors, stopping the entire room cold. Don't do that. Don't pretend this is just a regular commercial break. Tell them what really happened here. The studio held its breath. Chris took one final look back. Tell them that sometimes, when someone shows you who they really are, the most honest thing you can do is believe them. And with that, Chris Stapleton walked out of Studio 6A. The cameras stayed on Jimmy for several stunned seconds as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. Before the screen finally cut to commercial, the moment would be replayed endlessly, not just because a celebrity walked off live television, but because it exposed something deeper about respect, authenticity, and what happens when unshakable principles collide with unrelenting ambition.